the Even Better podcast, where your host, Seneca Wall of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Today's episode is brought to you by Your Clear Next Step and the Changemaker Certification Program.
Would you like to save time by solving the right problem sooner with a realistic and measurable plan? Reduce overwhelm by finding more sustainably productive ways to work? Improve employee morale by creating more positive workdays for you? Stay competitive by tightening your turn or increasing your agility in adapting to changing customer needs? If you said yes to those things, then we have the solution for you.
Interested in becoming a changemaker? Give us a call at 515-442-054.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Even Better podcast. I'm so delighted to have you here today. Thank you for joining us for a few minutes of your day. And I am so thrilled to welcome back our guest, Lisa Even. Lisa, thank you so much for spending a little time with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is going to be so fun. So for those of you who don't know Lisa, you got to go back and listen to episode 90. We are just so lucky to have Lisa with us today. She is out there making good ripple effects. That is what she's doing. She is the gal who published the book, Joy is My Job. She is doing great things. I've been so delighted to connect with Lisa. She is making a positive difference with the people around her. Folks, if you have been listening to the Even Better podcast, you know that I believe in making a positive difference. And it starts with one. It starts with one person, one day, one person at a time. You make a conscious choice to make a positive difference. And Lisa is one of us, right? She's doing it. She's making a positive difference, and she's inspiring all of us to do that right where we are, making a positive difference. And she's doing this with her family and teaching them to do the same thing, and with all of the people that she interacts with as a coach, as a trainer, as a public speaker, as an author. She is doing this. She's making good ripple effect. And Lisa, I'm so excited to hear about the journey that you're on. And then you're going to talk to us about something new that you're doing. Joy is Your Job is the first one. And then you've been doing some team building stuff. And now we're going to talk about living in the lab. And I'm so excited to hear about that. So tell us a little bit about your journey, a little bit about you. Catch us up, Lisa.
Yeah. Well, I always say I'm a small town girl. So I grew up in a really small town in Iowa, and I accidentally went to college because, it was one of those things where it wasn't the norm where I grew up. And so got to college and was kind of like, whoa, there's this big world out here. And spent the early part of my career in project management. I love a good milestone and deadline and checklist. And then I had a senior leader say, I think you're a people leader. And I was like, okay. So I moved over and did operational leadership for a number of years, and I loved it. I loved the cranky employees that were like, I'm not doing it. And I always wanted to be like, okay, before I get mad, like, why aren't we doing it? Like, why are you not doing the thing? Right? Because I always want to know there's probably a good reason behind it, whether you're maybe upset about something from years ago or, you just aren't feeling it today. Like, I want to know, kind of put on your glasses and see what you see. And so after a number of years of doing that, jumped into the public speaking world and have been doing speaking and coaching kind of centered around this idea that you happen to the world, not the other way around. And so whether it's the impact that you create, so your good ripple effect, or joy in your personal life or your professional life, those are the spaces that I like to play. Like I always say, like, I like to live in the lab. It's my sandbox. That's where you'll find me.
Oh, I love this. I love this. So you were in corporate America, and now you are still connecting with folks in corporate America, but you connect with folks all over in any role, in any space that they find themselves, helping people have like this is what we do, right? We help people have better work days. And so I'm keenly interested in other people that are just empowering people to build better cultures. Is that where your space has been in lately?
It has been. I do a lot in the space of thinking about the impact that you create on your team, whether it's as a leader and the energy that you bring into the room, the values that you carry, that they carry. And then I also do a lot with, are you actually creating joy at work and at home? Because I think that oftentimes when we talk about burnout or resilience or all of those things, you need something to look back on and something to look forward to. So we talk a lot about engagement and joy. So they kind of intermingle, but a lot with teams, organizations, and how people are showing up and behaving and what they believe.
You bet. Well, and you said something really interesting, and I love the way you put that. You talked about let me look at the world through your glasses. Let me put on your glasses for a second and
Mhm.
see that. And there's something really powerful there about the idea of empathy. There's the idea of
Yeah.
let me see the world from your perspective. Let me not just assume that I get it. Let me really try and relate to what you might be thinking or feeling, and let me
Yes,
try and understand. And that takes some active work.
it
Um,
does.
yeah, I love that. Thank you. All right. So
Yeah.
today we've picked for the topic living in the lab. So why that? Why living in the lab? This has something to do with experimentation. Talk to us about
Yeah,
this.
right? Yeah, I often say, are we living in the lab? Meaning, are we trying and doing new things? So whether it's something that you're thinking like, gosh, I've dreamed to write a book, or, my team is not, functioning well, then I'm always saying like, well, what are you doing to experiment? What are you doing to create like micro instances of, whatever it is you're trying to create? Because oftentimes I think that we think and we think and we think. And then we think and we think and we think. And we were like, I'm just going to think my way out of this, right? Like my team, we have bad culture. I got to think about it. I want to write a book. Well, I got to think about it. I want to start a business. Well, I got to think about it. And that I do say is good, right? You should do some thinking, but then like, what are you actually doing to experiment and to try out some new things? And so whether it's engagement and thinking about, well, we do potlucks and my team hates it. Okay, great. Well, what are we doing to live in the lab? Like, could we run a little bit of an experiment and see, what works instead? I pretty much have like 3 to 5 experiments running at a time for my own business, whether it's social media or, just things that I'm trying out. And I think if you think of it as living in the lab, like geeky, big goggles, lab beaker, if it fails, you don't feel bad, right? Like a scientist who's trying to create something has to mess up a million times before they get a success. So it's my way of not only saying like, A, don't overthink it, but also B, let it fail. Because if it fails, you're going to pivot and be like, you know what we should do next time? We should do it like this. And I think probably my biggest experiment was my book. Joy is My Job was something that I was scared to death to do. I don't consider myself an author. And I put it out there and I thought, let's run a little bit of an experiment. And if it fails and someone walks over to me and says, your book's not any good, I can turn to them and say, I'm doing hard things.
Mm. Okay, so as those are for our listeners here, as you have already started to glean, this is not just uniquely for people who are in business. This is not for business
Yeah.
leaders. This is not for people in a particular role or a particular job. This is kind of for anyone, right? Experimenting.
Yeah.
This idea of failing. I will catch my breath here because there are people out there for whom that word fail it creates a
Oh,
visceral
yeah.
reaction.
It
Um,
does.
so right there are many of us out there who go, whoa, hang on a second, Lisa, hang on one
Yeah.
second here.
You're like,
Whew,
no,
you
thank
just
you.
said fail. You didn't really mean fail. You meant surely you meant something else.
Yeah.
Surely you didn't mean fail. Whew, whew.
I know.
Ah, but
But think about it. As a toddler, you would have never learned to walk if you didn't fail. Right? Like you had to fall and get back up and fall and get back up. And so I always say, like, start small. We're not talking about like, please go and do this amazing thing that you like, climbing Mount Everest, but you're not a hiker. I'm talking like maybe buy some like hiking shoes and walk a mile or a half mile or a block and see like, did I die? Like, no, I think I actually was okay. And I think that, those micro experiments there's a really great, I don't even know where it came from, but they talk about changing your identity. Like if I said, "Oh, are you an artist?" and you're like, "No, I'm not." Well, as soon as you start doing a little bit of art, one could say you're an artist. So you have to like get out there and experiment a little bit to be like, "Do I like art? Do I want that to be part of my identity?" And that feels a lot easier and more permission giving.
yeah. So if you're creating this in a culture, you are doing something that is also creating a space of psychological safety. And
Absolutely.
this feels really, really powerful. This
It
feels really,
is.
really important and really big. So there's something for yourself individually that is honorable and that is giving yourself permission to fail and giving yourself permission to do things differently and to try. And like you said, maybe not something big and catastrophic. Maybe you don't get on Mount Everest the first day,
Yeah.
but maybe you do go for a walk. Like let's make it to the end of the driveway.
Yeah.
Let's start somewhere.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
within your team, creating spaces where it's okay to experiment, where it's okay to fail, it's okay to try and not be brilliant the first time and say, oh, fantastic. Okay, look at all these ways that we learned not to make a light bulb. What do we do next time? Okay, great. Now we know. What do we do next time? What an amazing culture that would be to make that safe.
Yeah. And I think, if you're a leader listening or someone on a team, it's like, well, how do you do it? The first thing that I did in my team is in my one-on-ones, because I was a leader of people, I had about 100 people underneath of me. And then I had supervisors underneath of me who had people under them. And so, I would meet with my leaders and oftentimes my team members, and I would ask them, what drives you nuts? And I'd listen and I'd be like, that's a really awesome list. And I'm like, okay, well, what's one of them that you would like to like make better? And they were like, oh, like I can do something about this. Now, some people loved it and some people were like, I don't know. But for the people who kind of turned and like cocked their head to one side and were kind of like, if I could make one of these better, and then they would pick the one. And then I would say to them, okay, what's one thing that we could do to go after that? But what I was really saying is, what's one experiment we could run? Right? Like I would say like, what would be one thing that we would like try or we could go after? And usually they had great ideas. And I'd be like, okay, so of the 3 ideas that you gave, right? Like I kind of helped them like force rank, like which one would you try first? And they're like, this one. And I'm like, okay. And then I would almost get like agreement of like, we don't know if this will work, do we? And they're like, not really. And I'm like, but we won't know until we try it, will we? And they're like, not really. I'm like, do you want to try it? And then I would always set it up. I always say like prep for the later. And I'm like, okay, so we're gonna meet, make it up. We're gonna meet back next week and we're gonna see how this went. And I would literally have it 2 ways. And I'd say, okay, if it doesn't work, we are gonna laugh about how this went. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, and if it works, we're gonna high five about how this went. And so it kind of gave them permission of like, if we end up on this road, we're good. If we end up on that road, we're good. And it was just this like way of dipping your toe in the water. No, they didn't know I was running experiments, but it was like, so and so over here was working on this and so was over here working on that. And before I knew it, like I had kind of a barrage of people who are working on things. And then I would bring that into my team meetings and I would say, like, hey, living in the lab, we've got some really cool things happening in our space. We got people working to fix problems or have ideas. And it started to be the way that we spoke about it. So that's a really long-winded way of saying, like, you don't have to make these grand plans. You can encourage people on a very small level to fix the things they don't like. And that's an experiment.
And that's an experiment. So I'm going back to something as maybe silly and tangible, but I'm just playing in my head. I'm gonna try an experiment here. So
Yeah.
thinking as silly and tangible as like the culture and team potlucks. So somebody says I don't like potlucks. Potlucks drive me nuts. Okay, great. Let's run an experiment, but we won't call it an experiment. So next time, let's don't do a potluck. Let's try. What's one thing about the potluck that annoys? Well, it annoys me that everybody brings something. Let's try something else. Okay, let's do something instead of a potluck. What would be fun? Well, let's have. What if we did games instead of food? Great.
Right.
Let's try it. And if it works, then we high five. And if it doesn't, then we laugh.
It's true. And the other thing I will say is, even from the potluck example, in my keynote, I give this really funny story about a team member named Paul and how he hates the potluck. And he's always complaining about the potluck at the potluck. Like, I hate the potluck, and you just laugh. I literally am like, I was telling another leader, I'm like, I got this guy on my team and he's complaining about the potlucks. And he looked at me and he goes, I don't really know what to do about that. And if I'm shortening the story quite a bit, but we ended up going on a trip and we needed to take an overnight ferry. We were in Europe. We took this giant boat from place to place. And I'll never forget the woman at the top of the ship kind of solved all my Paul potluck problems. And she was like pointing out different things on the ship that you could do, like live entertainment, restaurants, casinos. And we were with a friend couple, and my girlfriend and I were like, live entertainment. And our husbands were like casinos. And we were like fake bickering at the top of our boat. And the woman literally goes, excuse me? Like she needed to get us on this ship, right? She goes, time out. Okay, you two live entertainment, you two casinos. We do not have like not everything on this boat is for everyone. Okay. Not everything is for
Oh,
everyone, but we've got something for everybody. You two live entertainment, you two casinos, go. And I remember going back to Paul and I said to him, I was like, Paul, we got to talk about the potlucks. And he's like, I hate the potlucks. And I was like, hi, my friend, these are not for you, right? Like you don't enjoy the potlucks. They're not for you. And so we did come up with some other things that were more, up his alley, essentially. And he generationally was a boomer, did not want engagement. And so I laugh because sometimes I was like, hi, you don't have to do it. Like it's not for you. And that is really helpful too of kind of segmenting like what are you experimenting with?
mhm.
And sometimes like if it's not an experiment you want to run, don't run it. Like don't do it. And sometimes we feel like compelled to be like all or nothing. And I'm like, we're making it up. Like team culture is ours to shape. So don't feel obligated. It's not for you.
It's not for you. You don't have to come to this. It's not, yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. What a great story.
Thank you.
I bet Paul appreciated that.
He did. He kind of laughed and I looked at me like, whatever, Lisa. But it was true. Like a few weeks later, he actually, and I tell the story in the keynote, I had an employee run to my office and go, you'll never guess who brought a dish to potluck. And I looked at her and I was like, was it Paul? And she goes, yeah, how'd you know? And I literally like was like, just a guess. And then at potluck, I walked over to him and I was like, did you bring a dish to potluck? And he goes, oh, it's for the kids. Right. Like he was like acknowledging this was not for me, but it was for someone else. And so I can get on board with that. If I don't feel like it's happening to me, I can happen to it. And so
Uh,
that was a really fun moment for us to all have a good laugh of just like, never in our wildest dreams would we have ever guessed he would bring a dish to potluck.
That's so, that's so beautiful. That's
Yeah.
what a great example. Oh, okay. So as we think about experiment, these are great examples. Thinking about experimentation, thinking
Yeah.
about the idea of making it safe, thinking about the idea of thinking to the end. I love the way you thought about this, thinking to the end. So what if it works and what if it fails? And starting
Yeah.
small and like let's don't start with Everest. Let's start with our driveway or
Yeah.
the block or putting shoes on or having shoes. This is
Yeah.
having good hiking shoes. What are some other things? So what are some other tips that would get us started if experimentation isn't something you usually do, or the idea that even that word failing, even if you put it with failing forward or failing to learn, or
Yeah.
if that's not something you're comfortable with, how do you get yourself comfortable with, how do you get started on this? Any other tips for us, Lisa?
Yeah. I would say from a standpoint of, so I do this in my personal life and professional life. And when I think about running an experiment, I always say a time frame is really helpful.
Oh,
So if you're going to run an experiment and you are thinking, well, I'm feeling stress about it, I'm like, well, run the experiment for 20 minutes, run it for 5 minutes. Like, when you start to think about filling in the blanks of your mind, right? We tell ourselves, well, it's going to be really hard and all the things. And now we've got a big story about how it will never work. And I'm like, okay, fair. It may never work. But what if you tried it for 5 minutes? Or what if you tried it for 2 minutes? And so a time frame or even 2 days, like I'll do some things within my business where, I'm marketing in a particular way, or I'm even telling a story in a keynote and I'm changing like what I'm saying and it feels really awkward. And I will usually put a parameter around it of like time or number of times. So like, I'm going to try this out 2 times and see where we're at. I wouldn't do it just one because if you just do one and then you're like, well, see, there was the proof that I needed that it didn't work, like, I'm like, okay, be a little bit like, to yourself, be like, okay, self, I need to try this a couple of times to see what I think. But that usually calms my brain down enough to say, I'm going to try this 2 or 3 times and see how it goes. Even from a workout class, quick example, I was going to try out a bar class, which I have always played sports with balls. Right. So I'm kind of like rough and tough when it comes to that. So bar is more similar to what I thought was like ballerina-esque because you go into this class, they have a bar that you like hold on to. It's not actually ballerina, but that's the story I was telling myself. So the first time I went to class, I literally was walking in and I'm like, I tried this 3 times. Okay. 3 was a random number that I picked. This is an experiment I'm going to run. I'm going to go 3 times and then we're going to make a decision of like keep going or not. And if I look at my phone real quick, I have now been to, because it tells me, I have now been to 194 bar classes.
Oh my
And it was
goodness.
all because of an experiment that I ran that I said I wanted to work out. I wanted it to be within 5 minutes of my house, and I wanted them to have lots of class options.
Okay.
The experiment was I'm going to go to this class, this ballerina class. And actually, I got there and I'm like, oh, this isn't really ballerina at all. Huh.
Huh.
Right. Like, and then the second time I went, I was like, well, that was kind the first time I went, I was like, that was really hard. And the second time it was like, that was hard, but I didn't die. And then the third time I went, I was like, okay, that was hard, but it actually is giving me the result that I want. Like, I want to work out. It's close to my house. They have all the classes. And I think it's going to give me the result. And so, even in your personal life, you can find ways to experiment and give yourself permission to get out there, try it. And then, who knows, maybe you'll go 194 times.
Oh my goodness. I love this. And the idea of experimenting that keeps those of us who are like, wow, I don't want to commit to this thing because I'm not
Yep.
sure this is really the thing I want to commit to for 190 times.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not committing. I'm trying it out. I'm testing.
Yeah.
I'm checking it out. I don't know if I want to do this ballerina thing. Oh,
Yeah,
I love it.
exactly.
Yeah, I'll try it. I'll try it for 3 and I'll give myself this time boxed moment where it's not so scary. It's not so overwhelming. It's something that I can do. Beautiful.
Yeah. And even when people say, like, gosh, I'm surprised you're doing bar, because I don't look like a bar person, right? When I think to the end of it, I had a response ready to say, oh, I was running an experiment. And then they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, be ready to tell people, because then they get kind of curious and then they start running experiments too. And then they're telling you about their experiments. And then you're like, oh, maybe I should run an experiment. Like maybe I should live in the lab a little bit.
Live in the lab. I love
Yeah.
it. So if we were to tie a bow on this, wrap this up and leave our listeners with something that sort of pins this all together, how would you wrap this up?
I would say, number one, you happen to the world, not the other way around. I tell a lot of stories in my keynotes about we had a house fire due to lightning. Just a lot of things happen to you and you don't get to like pick that, right? Like, I didn't pick to have that happen to me,
Right.
but I always say, but you can happen to it. And that first way to happen to it, to get your mind maybe out of the overthinking space, is to run an experiment. And so if you want to happen to your life, whether it's like have a little bit more joy or more impact as a leader, or even like maybe executing on a dream that you've had in your pocket, run an experiment. What's one small thing that you could try out? And you'd be surprised at one more thing leads to one more thing, leads to one more thing. And the ripple effect, like you'll start to look and be like, huh, who would have thought?
Oh, that's so lovely. And if our listeners want to reach you, of course, they can contact us and we'll get them into connection with you. But how can they find you directly, Lisa?
Yeah, you can visit lisaeven.com. There's a contact us form. So you can always fill that out to tell me all the things. And then I am on social media. So Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And if they want to find your book, where's the best place to get your book?
Yeah, Amazon. Joy is my job. And again, it's all about ways to create joy in your life. And my husband and I track our joy like a bank account. So money in, money out. So we consider it a big part of the success of our marriage and our family. And just like we do, a paycheck at work allows you to buy food and do all the things. So if you are interested in having more joy and you want to run some experiments, that the book tells you how to do it.
How to do that. Fantastic. It's a fun one. I enjoyed my read of that one. And if you want to hear more about that one as well, go back to episode 90 on the Even Better podcast, where Lisa talks more about that one. And this would not be the Even Better podcast if I did not ask my trademark question, Lisa. What's making you even better these days?
Aside from my last name being even, I mean, like that is
Right.
right. And I think even the thing that's making me even better these days is just like realizing that you can take it seriously, but you should also not, all at the same time.
Oh, I love that. You should take it seriously and also not. Oh, I love that. Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. What a joy it is to spend time with you. Thank you.
Thanks.
It's been so fun. And to our listeners, thanks so much for tuning in. It's always a great time to spend time with you. And we hope that this has been useful to you. On behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, we hope the rest of your day is even better.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.